Oh my god, Jake and myself have just seen the Super Mario Brothers movie. Jake a little bit more recently than myself. I was at the premiere in LA. Jake just came back from New York, and we are ready to talk about this.
Excuse me, everybody coming through. Got a big adventure happening right now. Just clear a path for us.
Now, heads up, we're going to try to avoid any major spoilers. We're going to try and avoid giving too many specific story points away, Easter eggs, all that. So don't worry about being spoiled too much, at least beyond what we've seen in the trailers. With that out of the way, it's time to get into what we thought of the Super Mario Brothers movie. And Jake, I have to tell you, as a huge Mario fan, I love this freaking movie. I loved it. I had a blast. I don't know if I've ever had that much fun at a movie. With that said, I don't know if it's a good movie or a great one. I don't know. I don't really care. I had so much fun seeing Mario realized in a way I've been waiting my entire life for, especially after the 93 movie, which I saw as a kid in theaters. Did not quite hit the mark I was hoping for. This one, though, man, it delivered. It has so much heart. It's clearly poured into it. Every reference just made me happy to see. And not just because they were references, but it just showed that the developers, the creators, cared about this movie. And just seeing Mario realized on the big screen made me emotional at points. It was legitimately overwhelming for me at points. I didn't cry. I came close in a way that Mario Odyssey also made me cry at points, just because seeing it realized so beautifully, so competently, just made me so happy. And that's something very few movies, elicit from me, just sheer happiness. That's what this movie gave me. Jake, though, how did you feel? What's your top level reaction to seeing the Mario movie?
It is a jumbled mess of thoughts. I think that this movie is going to be so fun to talk about. I can't wait to see how other outlets review it, what all the different kinds of viewpoints say. And I think your initial review right there of just being a huge fan and enjoying the rendering of this world, the rendering of these characters, seeing them in this medium and that bringing you so much joy, I feel like that's half the battle. I think that is a huge victory for people out there, people watching our channel that are going to go see this movie and can rest assured that this is one of the most faithfully recreated video game characters just ever to cross over into a different medium.
It's not ashamed at all of its source material.
No. And I think sometimes that can be to a fault. And which we'll get into, but yeah, I think it's just what I realized watching this movie was that Mario, Nintendo, the Mushroom Kingdom gang, all of these characters, I remembered that these are icons on the level of Star Wars. And I think I forgot that. I think I'm so used to seeing them and playing the games or whatever. And I was sitting there and I was watching this movie and I was like, dang, animated movies wish they were this iconic. They wish they had stuff this good. Just the stuff. Bowser as a thing. The items as things.
Yeah.
All of the world element. I'm man, this is... Because there's a lot of, these elements in other animated movies. Especially, fantasy stuff. And I was just watching this movie and I was like, but they're not quite this good. They've got a lot of high-quality things here at play. And again, to see them rendered so beautifully here, I think goes a really long way before you even really talk about the mechanics of the movie.
Right. Yeah, you bring up some good points there. I mean, I think on the one hand, it's almost a bit of a cheat code for elimination because they already have these beloved characters, so they didn't have to sell us on them. They didn't have to make us like Mario. On the other hand, though, it's also easy to screw that up, and they didn't, and that's a huge point in its favor. How many video game movies have we seen at this point that just completely missed the mark? The Mario movie is unashamed of what it is. It knows exactly what it is, and I think they did a surprisingly great job of realizing what's largely a video, what has historically been this video game medium onto the screen in a way that somehow mostly makes sense. Now, again, I say this as a huge Mario fan. I suspect that people who aren't Mario fans are going to be much less positive on this movie than I am. It does have some weaknesses. I don't think it's perfect. The story is probably, borderline paper thin, but, so are the games. And again, just seeing them realized in this capacity was just so novel in its own right that it made it easy to overlook its shortcomings. And I think that is kind of where some of the divide is probably going to come from, is is just purely being, your expectations as a fan versus what you expect as a movie, as a narrative from say the more film going critics, which it sounds like you had the year showing, Jake, whereas I had more of the fan base at my showing.
Yeah, and I think that's true, and I think that's why I see like these two parts of my heart almost battling it out. But I like your point about it being unashamed of the source material, because I think even if you take something like Sonic, Sonic is a movie that they had to find a way in. They had to bring in the human beings. Exactly. They had to make it live action. They don't take any of those moves in this movie. This is like, no man, we're doing Mario stuff. And nothing else.
Yeah, Sonic worked in spite of itself. Whereas Mario's like, man, here is almost all the characters all at once. They're grabbing power-ups right away. The first music we hear in the movie, Jake, is the Bowser theme song from the games. That shocked me. Like, it shocked me and it moved me. I'm like, this is incredible. Seeing the Bowser airship with the Bowser music that we all recall from the games. I don't think anyone else has done this. And it showed to me this was a movie made for Mario fans first. Like, it's clear that Miyamoto probably had some heavy influence here. Not to say that everyone else wasn't fully on board with the idea, but like, it's very clear that this is through and through a Nintendo production, at least in part, a huge part.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how prized they treat putting things in from the games. And it's not like I kind of can see the joke coming, where there is a little bit of like, oh, I went to go see Moby Dick the movie and I can't believe all these references to Moby Dick the book. It's like, obviously there's going to be stuff from the games because it's an adaptation, but there is a forcefulness to the music plays such a big role in this, but just like little things in the background, stuff that like is only a thing if you know what the thing is. Peach has a moment that I'm sure even me just saying that, you know what it was, where I was like, oh yeah, that little that's a Peach thing, I got that. and it's the kind of thing where like, if you don't know those references, those little tasty treats are just gonna pass you by. And I think that this movie puts so much of its juice into those little tasty treats that I almost wonder the experience of a human being that is watching this movie not getting those. What, you know what I mean? Yeah. What are the little delights?
It's going to be dramatically different, I think. And we'll find out when the full reviews come out. Not that particularly matters. All I care about is what I thought of it, and I had a great time. With that being said, though, for me, I found it difficult. Like, I have a harder time judging a movie objectively, where the hell that means. After just a single viewing, I prefer to, have multiple if I like the movie. And have, like, for instance, Avatar 2, wasn't a huge fan of it the first time. They really grew on me after subsequent viewings. I think there's a chance my viewing of the Mario movie could drop. My impression could drop after subsequent viewings. But you know what? Right now I'm discussing my first viewing, and just seeing it there, sitting in the theater, seeing those gorgeous visuals, seeing Mario realized with this level of detail, both in terms of the graphical fidelity, the animation, the voice cast as well, which I think by and large nails it. We'll talk about that soon. And all the little touches from the games, not even little touches, big touches too. Like the fact that they realized the Mushroom Kingdom in this way that it feels like a real place, and they even play around with those elements too, like the Mario, like the Toads hitting the coin blocks as ATM machines, and it makes you think like, how does this world work anyway? And they don't really delve too deep into that, but just deep enough that like it's intriguing, and the fact that they're able to make a largely cohesive narrative out of what is by and large a very abstract series. Like the games don't concern themselves much with story at all, but to the extent that they do here in this movie, that there is a story, I was surprised that where they reached in some cases. I'm like, oh, I recognize that. That's kind of cool. And I like too that this movie almost acts as like this giant Mario theory unification type thing, where it's like taking stuff from everywhere and unifying it all into finally like a cohesive whole in a sense. And it really just all blew me away in that level. Just the fact that like it functioned, Jake. The fact that we had a video game movie that's so pure the source material that functioned as a movie still kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, it's a short movie. It's a 90-minute movie, and anytime they even for a second diverted into lore, I was like, really? I was like, oh,
there's one thing I think that shocked both of us, Jake.
I was like, wow, they said, no, it's gotta be in. It's gotta be.
But how did you think it functioned as a story, though, Jake?
Yeah, it's incredibly fast-paced. I think a little to its detriment. There was a degree to which I think like I saw scenes in trailers and I was like, oh man, I can't wait to see the full scene. And then it was the full scene. And they're like, no, we're moving on, baby. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But I think for me, the story is like, I've heard you call it shallow. I've heard you call it thin. I've seen other people kind of echo this too. I kind of want to go a step further. And I feel like this is pretty much, it's almost nothing. It's almost not there. And the parts that are there, I would almost like be willing to push back and say that they're not. Like, sometimes characters will come out and say, this is what I'm doing. Bowser, he comes out and says, this is my mission, until it's not. And his mission doesn't really make a lot of sense. And he doesn't have goals. None of the characters have goals. And some of the characters have flaws, some of the heroes, and the flaws are not addressed until they get over them. And I just think that, like, from like literal plot points to the emotional arcs, none of it was there. It was we're moving from this cool thing to another cool thing to I'm bumping into you, we're meeting for the first time, this is me, this is you, we're best friends, let's go. And right. that was the whole movie. They never gave characters an opportunity to speak more than 3 consecutive sentences. They plant nothing, so when things need to have a turn, it's not based on anything. It's just because we're getting close to the end of that 90 minutes. And I don't think it's because it's a kid's movie, and I don't think it's because it's a video game adaptation. I think it's because it's written poorly. So, yeah.
I don't know if poorly is a word I would use, but I don't disagree with most of what you just said there. The movie does have a breakneck pace, which isn't necessarily a negative, but there were a few times where I'm like, I wish you would let this breathe a little bit more. And I think I would say one of the bigger flaws is just how quickly, for instance, Mario's growth himself is. Like, he starts off as a character, you know, he's new to this world, he doesn't really know how to do anything, but then he's got the training montage, and he's basically the Mario we know. And, like, it just kind of, like, did undermine a little bit of, I felt like, what could have been a more impactful moment. I felt like, again, I love that the movie is unashamed of what it is, to the degree that power-ups are like a major factor in this movie, and I feel like almost a little bit too much. Almost too much of a factor, because like almost every solution, there's a power-up, it gets Mario through it. I'm like, why did you need Mario? Like, couldn't anyone just use his power-up then and done it too? You know, Mario had his little training montage, and now he's a master of using power-ups, and
you can't ask questions like that in this movie. They'll get you in trouble.
And that's why I'm curious / a little afraid of what I'll think going through the second time. But, you know, with all that being said, I don't even know that matters too much because, again, I look at it almost as like a theme park ride. I will say the ending I found a little touching, maybe not as much as it could have been, but I thought there were cute elements in there. I'm like, okay, I like that. You know, that's something we hadn't quite seen before in Mario, really to that degree. But again, I think that if you're looking for like a deep story with like characters who are overcoming their own issues, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere. If you want to see a typical Mario story fleshed out a little bit, realized in a glorious, gorgeous way on screen, man, this movie's for you.
I think I'm with you on that, and I think where I come down on it in terms of like the writing of it all is that I really think I'm less upset about it being a theme park, and I'm more upset about that. I think there are little tweaks you could make in this movie that would really up its effectiveness. I don't know if we really want to get into that in this particular discussion.
No, probably not too many specifics unless you can give it in a very general way. We will have a spoiler discussion soon enough where we'll get into the nitty-gritty of everything, but is there any like general idea?
For sure. I mean, like Luigi, we all know Luigi's defining character trait is that he's supposed to be afraid.
Right.
We never see him be afraid to the detriment of himself or the brothers.
Yeah.
And then you know, like when his arc comes full circle, there is no real change in like, I don't know, it just seems to be like the thumb pressing on it's the end of the story, so now this is when this thing happens. So I think that's one. There's one that I'm not going to go into, I will save, that I think perfectly isolates all the problems in the movie. So stay tuned for that. But I want to hit on something I thought you said that was really interesting. Like the end, feeling, just because I think it's put together, I'm going to say it again, poorly. But at the end, I'm kind of with you. And I had to ask myself, I was like, why did I kind of feel things at the end? Why did the ending, why was it capable of evoking? And I think I know why. I genuinely think we have to give them a ton of credit for the character design goes a long way. And this might sound stupid, but I think letting Mario and Luigi be like these sweet, cute little doughboys I like, there's something about them. Like, when they do cute stuff, it is really cute. And I think I underestimated that coming into this movie. I was like, man, these are sweet little cuties. Like, they're just so, like, you know, when they do something that, like, tugs on your heartstrings, you just, like, feel it. I'm like, dang.
You know, I think there is a universe in which you had an even stronger story here. But I understand why they may have shied away from it, and it's possible it could have come at the expense of what they were aiming for, which was, again, it just being like a really fun theme park ride that makes you just feel like you had a really good time at the end.
Let's talk about the voice cast.
Yes, good call.
There is one character for me that really got under my skin. And
I'm curious if it's gonna be the same one. I'll go first.
Please.
Cranky Kong.
Yes!
Yes! Good!
Yes!
Thank you!
What was that?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's like, I'm sure the voice actor is great, nothing against him. I feel like that was a miscast. He was the only one that distracted me. The only one who sounded nothing like I expected.
Yeah, I actively saw, like, it took me out of the movie and made me go, whoa, this is what they went with for this guy? Like, it's not even like, I wouldn't even say it was Cranky.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't even true to his name. Did they even call him Cranky in the movie even?
I believe they called it. I
Okay.
believe Peach called him Cranky Kong.
Got it. Yeah, he wasn't even that cranky. I feel like, it was they really just mischaracterized him from how we know him as in the games. Which, to be fair, maybe if you're not a fan of the games, will bother you less. But, like, he didn't even sound old to me. He looks old. He didn't sound old.
Agreed. He sounded like a weirdo. I in my head, I was like, okay, they wanted Jeff Goldblum and they couldn't get him.
Oh man,
and they had somebody do Jeff Goldblum. Like, that's totally what it felt like to me.
Jeff Goldblum actually might have been. I think he would have been a better fit. I think
probably.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have been a great fit. I think it would have been a better fit. So yeah, I agree. He took me out of the movie. I think the only one to have. What did you think of Donkey Kong then? Yes! Because I've seen there's been some outrage online, outrage in quotes, of Seth Rogen himself saying he just did himself. He just did his own voice. He didn't change it at all. How did you think that worked?
I liked Donkey Kong actually. Yeah, I thought he was fun. It made me think that maybe Seth Rogen has not been adequately used in animated movies enough. I was kind of like, wow, for some reason you just like really fit in here. Right. I think that my one criticism, I think, is less of Seth Rogen, more of the direction, is that I thought the movie was very knowing that it was Seth Rogen, and I got his laugh too many times.
That's the only time when it reminded me of Seth Rogen. Otherwise, I forgot it was him, and I get to see it as DK. But yeah, the laugh definitely took me a little bit out of it too. Chris Pratt as Mario. How did you think that worked?
Fine.
Yep.
Fine.
I liked it.
Yeah, if anything, more positive than negative.
It was just a little jarring to me at first, especially because they draw attention to it, which I thought was kind of cute. At the same time, like, oh, you're really making it stand out. Once again, into the movie though, I completely forgot about it. I'm like, I forgot. Yeah. I saw it as Mario. I love Charles Martinet's Mario, probably still my preferred Mario, but I forgot that it wasn't him in this movie. It totally worked for what it was. Yeah,
I think he really shined in scenes with Peach. Yeah. I think those were really some of my favorite scenes in the movie. Because I think a lot of Mario is his character in this movie. I don't think he gets a lot of like really good like spoken line moments, maybe as some of the other characters do. And so for me, those couple that he had, I actually thought he came through and was able to reach something that I appreciated. Yeah.
Let me tell you something, Jake. One of my favorite. Have you played and beaten Luigi's Mansion 3?
Yes.
Awesome. One of my favorite moments in that game is the end. When you see Mario and Luigi together again, and not just together, they're like working together toward a common goal. And I love that. I'm like, I want to see more of that in the games. And that's what we get here. We get more of that. We get more of Mario and Luigi. We get more of Mario and Peach. And we see them interact in ways that you don't really see a whole lot in the games. And that really stood out to me too. So just having more of that like felt kind of special.
I started to laugh. I'm not going to spoil it here because you just reminded me of a joke in the movie that in our spoiler discussion I will bring up, that truly one of the funniest jokes it really got me. I was in that theater howling.
I've got to ask you about this afterward.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I can ask in a generic way. Did it involve any character being dazed?
No.
Okay, all right. I have no idea. We're going to talk after.
No,
we're going to talk after.
Yeah.
All right, I got to know. Remember that joke, Jake.
Standout voice though for me. Far and away, unexpected. Peach, man.
She's great.
Peach.
She's great.
I'm like kind of unfamiliar with that actress, and I left a big fan. I thought she was able to really hone in on like this thing that was halfway to a Disney princess, halfway to something like totally her own. Was able to like reach some sentiment, some knowingness, some like sweetness. I was really impressed with that performance. I thought it was really, really good.
100%. The performance and the characterization of Peach in general, I think, is a huge win. Like, I love she's just not a damsel in distress, and I think not just for the updating it for modern times, but I think also making Luigi the one who's in need actually just strengthens the overall narrative. It's like that makes way more sense to have Mario need to go after his brother than some woman he just met. Or didn't meet, I guess, as it would be had she been captured. But yeah, I love how she's characterized. She's strong, she's feisty, and yeah, I think they just gave her a great role, and it's fun seeing how she's portrayed here. And yeah, I just want more of that. So I think they did a great job. The voice actress killed it. Awesome.
I was surprised they let Peach be a little goofy.
They did.
I did not see that coming, and I thought that was really cool. She like. There was like a really fully formed character there that I really enjoyed for Peach. I think it's like I think it's easily like the best Peach of all time, but not that I think that was ever in question. but yeah, I like grew attached to that character in a way that I was like, oh man, I'm gonna miss this when I go back to Game Peach.
But there's one big character we haven't touched on yet, Jake. It literally being Bowser. He clearly an early standout. He was the first character we saw, literally, from the trailers. What did you think of his portrayal here, both through the performance of Jack Black and as a character?
Disappointed.
Interesting.
Disappointed.
Interesting.
I know that this is gonna get me some flack, but hear me out. I think, surprised how much I felt like it was Jack Black in a Bowser costume.
Interesting.
And the degree to which they let him do Jack Black-isms, I was kind of like, whoa, we're going all the way Jack Black for this. And I felt like there was a loss of Bowser in favor of a you knowing that underneath this mask is Jack Black, and that's kind of in the way that I felt they highlighted Seth Rogen's laugh. I felt that there were Jack Black things that they were like, oh, people love Jack Black, they're gonna love this, rather than like do it. He was the character I think was written most for the actor they got, and I could see that happening. Whereas I think that like you could see you could not do it. There are things in this movie they wouldn't do if it wasn't Jack Black.
That's interesting. I hadn't specifically considered that point, and yeah, you may not be wrong. I would say I didn't feel Jack Black coming through quite as strongly as you did, and by and large, I actually really liked Bowser's portrayal here. I think his voice was basically perfect. Open the gates! And I mostly liked his characterization. But there are a handful of moments that felt like he had borderline personality disorder, and that threw me off a little bit. And you kind of touched on earlier where his motivations seem a little unclear, or maybe too clear. I don't know. But they felt shallow, and I'm like, oh man, I kind of wish they hadn't gone in that specific direction. And and I kind of felt like I wish they just made him a little bit more, I don't know, like just a little bit more evil, or clearly evil.
Dude. Andre, he lost his edge.
Yeah.
He totally lost his edge. That first trailer we saw, I remember in the discussion, I was like, whoa, this Bowser is capable.
Right.
He is violent. He's going to get things done. And nope, they fooled me. I wish there was a little like, he was just weak. He was weak. I wanted more.
See, okay, yeah, so I get that. I still liked him, but I think it wasn't as flawless as I was hoping. So, and I'll be curious to see how they build on that in a sequel specifically. So we'll see. But you kind of brought another point there, Jake, that I want to touch on real quick.
Yeah.
Do you think they showed off too much of the movie in trailers? We had multiple trailers, and it got to the point where I'm like, man, I wish they would just stop showing stuff, because it feels like they're showing a lot. Did you feel that way watching the movie?
Yes, but I also work for youtube.com/GameXplain.
Right.
So that's a factor.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yes, I will say in my viewing was mostly outlets that cover movies, not specifically video game movies, and I was surprised by how many of the jokes they laughed out loud at that were in the trailers, which made me think they had not seen them.
Right.
So that's something to keep in mind. But for my personal viewing and for people watching this channel, yeah, I kind of thought they showed too much only because I saw glimpses of scenes from trailers and assumed there was more to them, and then there really wasn't. And I think that was like I kind of feel like the first 20 minutes of the movie. I was like,
saying, yeah.
saw a lot of this.
That's true. Definitely. I mean, there are like little sequences in there that we hadn't seen, and those stood out to me, but I had basically the surrounding ones memorized. So I do agree in that sense. I didn't feel like it detracted too much from my enjoyment, and I will say though, I was actually surprised by, to their credit, how little we'd seen of the final 20 to 30 minutes. We saw almost nothing of that, if my time frame is accurate. I'm like, oh, did not see that coming, and that was kind of cool. So it was nice to be surprised by the finale of the movie.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. You're right. That was completely unique. I also thought it was funny how, so much of our content like plays in my head, and you made that video that was like, oh, they took out the line of what is this place, and then did you catch it?
Wait, no, was it in the movie? I totally actually didn't.
Yeah, it's in a different part of the movie.
Oh, that makes sense. Oh, that
and I was like, wow, this line just
that's hilarious. The only way to put it. It's probably different at every screening. Just random. Yeah. Just pops up randomly. All right, Jake, we're half an hour into this discussion. I feel like we've covered a lot. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we wrap it up here?
The licensed music in this movie is so good.
It's really good.
I'm gonna say it is the best use of licensed music in a movie I've seen in a long time. Every one of these songs, individually, I'm not like a huge fan of any of these songs, but in this movie, I went, oh yeah.
I love hearing that. I love hearing that. I will say they felt a little jarring to me, but it's just weird hearing like, common music in a Mario universe type thing, but then you remember their actual real world heritage. I'm like, okay, actually totally makes sense. And the places they use it by and large are perfect. Some of my favorite tracks actually are in there. Two of my all-time favorite songs, maybe 3 even, are in there. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Although I will say there's one song I feel like was used and they didn't quite earn it, especially how it's been used in another famous animated movie. I'm like, I don't know if this is the right place for it, but I still enjoyed it, had fun, and yeah.
Okay, I won't say what it is, but the first one got a big reaction.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
That sequence, I was like, oh, this is fire. I want to watch this over and over again. That sequence was so cool.
And really, the use of music throughout the movie is just, it's perfect. I think it's perfect. Like, the way, because it's not too reliant on the pop music. There's only a handful of songs, really, to my memory. By and large, most of it is, rooted in Mario, and not just in the manner that they were used in the games. Like, you hear like little pieces like kind of flutter in and out, and it's just used so well.
Yeah, there are a few times where it hit like so high for me that I knowing what I know about myself, didn't expect myself to have as big of a reaction as I did, because I think it was so perfectly placed. I will say occasionally there was a part of my brain that was like, I think we're maybe going to the orchestra too much. I
can see that.
I mean, yeah, like maybe a little too proud of the Mario music. I think like the big one for me is we saw this in a trailer when they're in like the big Mushroom Kingdom town. You're just kind of seeing everything, like the can falls down the stairs, like that whole sequence. I was a little bit like, is it because we're blending the video game like kind of like chip tunes, like the sound effects and the orchestra's all going at a time? Because there's this weird effect where sometimes in this movie I did feel like there was a movie going on and I could see the orchestra in my head playing instruments. Rather than it like being I'm in the movie, you know what I mean?
That's interesting. I didn't have that at all.
Okay.
I thought maybe I will now that you mentioned it on my second viewing, but I thought for me the music worked flawlessly. Like I did, except minus the handful like when my initial bumping up against the real world music appearing in there. But
yeah,
aside from that, I thought it worked pretty darn well. So
I will say, I do think something to keep in mind when watching this is that like just because something is different from like the way we have been trained to watch movies doesn't mean that it's bad. And I think part of my reaction was just like hearing music that was not originally designed to be the score of a movie in this context. I think there was a little bit of something, as somebody that like used to work in that industry, I was like hearing the music and my brain was a little like, this isn't right, yeah, so, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I think I was trying to digest it.
No, that's a good way of putting it. And I think too, that's what some people are going to be like, oh, look at them excusing everything they didn't like about the Mario movie, because they're Mario fans, it didn't matter. And it's like, no, like we're acknowledging the problems. Myself, like I realize it's not perfect. It's not, it's not a flawless movie by any means. But at the end of the day, like I have to ask myself, did I have fun watching that movie? I had a freaking blast. Yeah. I had so much fun watching this movie. Again, I think in a way that I can't recall ever. I don't know if I've ever had this much fun watching a film. And again, a lot of that's just because of what I brought into it. I'm a lifelong Mario fan. That's why I do what I do these days. I love Mario. I met Miyamoto at the after party, practically lost my mind. Luckily not in front of him, but I had just, it was just really cool meeting the person who created this character that I've loved my entire life. And so like seeing it again realized in a way that is the polar opposite of the original 93 movie, which I now appreciate in its own right, but for very different reasons than this movie. And it just really it made me emotional in a way that very few things have. And I was talking to Ken and Krista about this actually right after the movie, and Krista really brought up a great point, or a great way of framing it. It reminded her of a 90-minute version of the New Donk City Festival from Super Mario Odyssey, which when that hit, man, that hit me so freaking hard. And for someone who had never played Mario before, I'm sure it doesn't do anything for them. For me, I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. And that's how I felt watching this movie. I'm like, man, I am loving this. They were just killing it in almost every sense of what I expect a Mario thing to be, and I loved it on that level. And the fact that I could made me so happy.
Yeah, and even when I say that I don't appreciate the writing, I'm kind of talking about big strokes, because there are still things that I'm ready to be like, this movie really, really tickled me. Quick shout outs, Kamek, dude. Love Kamek. Perfect.
Loved it.
Love
great
Kamek.
job.
There is a Koopa in this movie that I'm pretty sure is the guy that's the voice of Robin from Teen Titans.
Oh, nice.
And they give him some lines that I was dying. This particular Koopa, I was like, you are killing the game, sir. That was amazing. There are some sight gags in this movie that are just really well done.
It's really funny at points. Laugh out. Our theater was losing it at points. So there was one.
Every appearance of Dry Bones is a W.
So
every
good.
one.
So good.
Yeah.
There is one line in particular, Jake, that Mario has. I lost it. I'm like, oh my god, that is hilarious. And I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about, but I don't. I thought so. We'll talk after, and again in our spoiler discussion, I'm sure. Yeah. So anything else, Jake, you want to draw attention to, or?
I just thought of a good example for something I was trying to say earlier, and I just want to clarify this idea of it's for the fans, it's committed to the games, but then sometimes there would be this element, and I'd go, where's that from? The Kongs and the cars.
I actually do agree with that. That feels completely random. I never made that connection before, and maybe that's our own baggage we're bringing in for someone who is unfamiliar. It doesn't, it makes, sure, that makes sense. Why not? I do agree. That one felt like a little bit of a stretch for me too.
They didn't even try to explain.
No, they didn't. It is a little weird. It's especially, God, now you're making me think about this, Jake, too much, because Donkey Kong, they live in huts, right? They live in huts and temples. They have an arcade.
They swing.
They swing around. Here they are with the most advanced vehicles known to man. And but you know what? Whatever. Again, it's all about the theme park experience, right? You're just along for the ride. Literally, in this case, you're going on Rainbow Road soon enough, and and it's just fun. Yeah, you kind of have to turn off your brain at points. Not that you ever expect to turn it on for a Mario game, but all right, Jake, let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
I gotta know on the GameXplain scale or whatever scale you want to use, how did you feel about the Mario movie? If you had to give a score right now, what did you think?
Wow, this is so tough because oh god. This is brutal. This is tearing me up inside because in a way I didn't like it, but I loved it. But
right. I think
it got to me.
Yeah. So Jake, if you were to tell a friend how you liked it, what would you say?
I loved it. Wow. Go see it.
All right.
Yeah, because honest to God, I just don't care about the flaws that much. Right. It turns out what makes a good Mario movie and what makes a good movie for me are different. And I this served me. It served me. I left the theater and went, yummy. And that was, and that was it. So, whatever. Like, it's not gonna win an Oscar.
Right, no,
like,
exactly,
I will,
no.
you know what I mean? I will give better films
Right.
worse scores because they're trying to serve me as something else. I think this is trying to feed a particular part of like my brain, and I think it succeeds on that level.
Yeah. No, I think you pretty much hit it on the head right there. Like, I think I said earlier, even, like, you know, I don't know if this is a great movie, even necessarily a good one, but I don't care because I had a ton of fun and I really enjoyed it. You know, like if you're grading the narrative by itself, yeah, it's definitely not going to win any awards. But I don't care. That's not what I look for in the movie. All I care about is, or at least not in this movie, and all I care about is, did I have a good time? Yes, I did. And in a way, I don't know if any other movie is even capable of, because they were able to tap into something that few others can. You know, 30 years of nostalgia for much of their audience, you know, and they delivered in such a way that I never expected them to be able to. I do want to explore some of my complaints more in depth in a later video. But overall, I had a blast, loved it. I'm very curious to see it a second and probably a third time, considering I have 2 sets of tickets now. and we'll see how it holds up. My opinion may change. Even if it does, it doesn't undermine how much fun I had the first time. So right now, I loved it. I love that first experience. Wouldn't trade it for the world. We'll see if it holds up on second and third viewing. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll be worse. Doesn't really matter. It was fun the first time. So
can't wait to see it a second time. There are some movies, if you told me I had to go see it again, that's tough. So like right now, I've like got my tickets for like my initial tickets from for like Wednesday morning opening day. Can't wait. I'm excited to sit down and take it in again.
Yeah, it's a brisk 90 minutes. It flies by fast. So.
That, and I think that might help it more. I gotta really meditate on that. I gotta, yeah.
All right, Jake, it's been great talking to you about, with you about the Mario movie. Everyone, those are our overall top-level impressions. While we try to avoid as many spoilers as possible, I think we did pretty good, Jake. I think we did a really good job addressing our key points without spoiling really anything. But make sure to stay tuned for our full spoiler discussion coming up soon. We'll have tons of other videos. And also, by the way, stick through to the end credits. You don't want to leave if you're a Mario fan. Stick through to the end. No spoilers here, but you gotta watch them. So,
Andre, people left in my showing.
No, everyone stayed in my showing. Everyone stayed, Jake.
No, people got up, and I was like calling from my seat. I was like, "Don't go!" And they left anyway.
I cannot. The nerve of those people. The nerve. And then they're gonna go home, give it 1 star out of 4. And it's like, you know why? Because he didn't sit there to the end credits. Also, real quick, by the way, the entire credits are great. Like there's a whole like animation for it. It's all well done. It's great. So, gorgeous movie, beautiful sounding. I loved overall, and that's our review. So, everyone, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more. We'll catch you later. Bye, everyone.